Let's welcome Scrooge. Scrooge, what was it like when you realized that Bob was poor?
I felt guilty because I felt like I didn't pay him as much as I should have.
Why didn't you give Bob a raise when you were so wealthy?
I wanted to save for myself, but now I regret it.
What did you think when you saw what was going to happen in the future?
I was even more guilty because I saw that if I didn't change my greedy ways, I would be dead in a matter of seconds.
Now let's welcome the ghost of the past. What did you show Scrooge rejecting his marriage and only thinking about money?
I wanted to show him the important things he did wrong by giving in to his selfish ways.
Why did you disappear after you showed Scrooge what happened?
To let the ghost of Christmas present take over and show him his life.
Now let's welcome the ghost of Christmas present and future. Why did you show Scrooge how he was going to die?
I showed him that because he was mean and selfish. He needed to understand that he was mean and selfish, so I chose the approach of scaring him straight.
Why was Scrooge's grave different from the other graves?
It was different because he was greedy, so it was like a punishment in the afterlife.
Why did you show Tiny Tim's family eating dinner?
I showed him that because he needed to know that the Cratchit family was poor, and he should rather act like that than rich instantly.
How did you come into Scrooge's house?
I came into his house by opening the roof like a door, and I came with food to get his attention.
Okay, thank you.
What do the chains feel like?
The chains are really heavy and not fun to walk around with.
So, Jacob Marley, why are you carrying the chains?
As my punishment for robbing poor people.
Very interesting. Anyway, let's welcome Bob Cratchit. How did it feel when you have to have dinner every night with barely any food?
Well, it's really sad, and I have to go to bed every night without anything to eat and food, so I'm starving each night.
That must feel terrible. How did you feel when Scrooge came with presents for everyone that night?
I felt really happy that night because before we were very thankful for what we had, but then we realized that Scrooge had a change of heart.
Well, that's great.
Presenting a Christmas Carol news forecast.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Holiday News Forecast. Today we will be interviewing and telling the story of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. What a childhood memory. It all began on a Christmas Eve long, long ago. Mr. Scrooge, how did you treat your nephew and this man before?
I treated them with ignorance. Poor Fred. I told him that I wouldn't attend his Christmas dinner. My own nephew, how could I? And my apprentice, Bob. I had almost made him work on Christmas. I have made many terrible mistakes.
Yes, Mr. Cratchit, how did you feel when Mr. Scrooge gave you a half day off from work?
Oh, it felt like it was Christmas already. All those years, I worked every single day. I finally built up courage to ask him, and he did put up a small fight, but at the end he agreed.
That must have felt great. Mr. Fred, your own uncle turned your dinner invitation down because he didn't like Christmas.
It stung me like a bunch of wasps. I knew my uncle was a very greedy guy, but I thought that maybe deep down he would say yes and come to the dinner, but his final answer was no.
You must have suffered that night. Thank you, Mr. Fred, Mr. Scrooge, and Mr. Cratchit. Next, we will bring up the ghost of Marley, who was Scrooge's long-dead business partner and enters Scrooge's house later that night after he turns down his nephew's dinner party and gives Mr. Cratchit a half-day off.
I am the ghost of Marley, Scrooge's partner ghost.
Thank you for joining us. Now, what did you say to Scrooge when you appeared?
On that same Christmas Eve, I crept into his house with all of my chains on to where he was sitting. He was startled, but then I explained to him that because I was a greedy soul in my living days, I had to be chained forever.
Poor you.
Yes, I didn't want Scrooge to suffer the same way I did, so I warned him. Tonight, 3 ghosts will come to visit you. Listen to all of them and do what they say. And just like that, I vanished.
Let's hope that Scrooge listens to Marley's advice.
I visited Scrooge first that night. I took him to the time where he was enjoying Christmas and he was in love with young Belle. I showed him how he had a great time.
How did he react?
He begged me to stop showing him that scene because he knew he didn't marry Belle because of the greed of love.
Then what did you do?
I vanished into the night.
Thank you. Let's bring out Scrooge's love, Belle, to see how she felt. Welcome, Belle.
Hello.
How did you feel when Scrooge broke up with you because of his greediness?
I was heartbroken when he left me.
Oh, I definitely know how you feel.
What did I do to him?
I know, greed can take over many things, including love. Let's bring out the next ghost. Welcome, the ghost of Christmas present. May I ask, where did you take Scrooge?
I took him to Cratchit's house to show him how their dinner looked like.
What did he see?
We saw the family's dinner. It was a small dinner, but they saw it as a huge feast. We also saw one of Bob's child, Tiny Tim. He had a cane and walked with a limp, but he was the most joyful of all. Why shouldn't I be happy? It was a scrumptious meal. It was the best Mommy could do.
Wow, you're so generous. I like that characteristic in you.
That's what I hope Scrooge realized. I think he did.
Yes, I agree. Now we will visit the last ghost. Hello, ghosts of Christmas future. Thank you for joining us today. Now, what happened later that night?
I took Scrooge into the future Christmas. There was a graveyard and an unvisited stone, a cheap one. Scrooge had passed away from an empty heart.
Oh no, let's hope he can fix this mess he's getting himself into.
I advised him the same.
Let us find out what happens by talking to Mr. Scrooge. What did you do next?
Well, I woke up startled that morning. I had to help that poor Cratchit family. I got a couple of bags of gold coins, toys, food, and more. I headed down to the shop. I gave Mr. Cratchit a raise. I also went to my nephew, Fred's dinner.
That is the kindest things you have probably ever done, considering your past.
Yep, I felt really good about it.
You probably did.
It was the best Christmas in my life.
I am dying to know how Bob's family felt. Let's do one more quick interview. Miss Cratchit is Bob's wife. Hi, Mr. Cratchit. How do you feel about Scrooge's new behavior?
At first, I thought that Mr. Scrooge was a little too much into working and spent less time interacting or talking to people. But now I think he's the kindest person I've ever met. He saw that we didn't have much food, so instead of donating money for it, he just came to our house and gave us the food directly. I don't know how he changed so much in one night, but I'm really glad he did. He also gave poor Tiny Tim toys to play with. Now I think we were never poor, thanks to Mr. Scrooge.
Oh, that was so touching. Thank you for sharing your story, Miss Cratchit. I am glad you saw the change in Mr. Scrooge and forgave him. Fred, the ghost of Christmas present, and Miss Cratchit, played by Isha Reichler. Scrooge, Tiny Tim, and Belle, played by Akshaya Rajesh. our beloved host, me, Rita. And finally, Bob Cratchit, the ghost of Marley, the ghost of Christmas past, and the ghost of Christmas future, played by Rushi Shah.